provider, which is nothing but the only service that we have right now, which you can invoke from your configurations, apart from setting it up in which you create a get method to return the values that you have from a provider. Then we discussed about what routing is, how you can implement routing in your Angular. We discussed about HTTP service, why, how it is used, how you can implement it to retrieve any information from API, or from simply from a text file as well, based upon, or JSON file as well, based upon how you what type of calculations you are doing in your program. So today, to start off with, we'll discuss about the important concept of your Angular, that is the concept of something called $apply. So we have three these methods. What is the purpose of having these methods, and what exactly these methods do? So whenever we are creating a data binding, whenever we are creating a model and we are binding it with our controller, every time when that happens, we are creating basically a scope object, right? So whenever we are creating a scope object, AngularJS is going to create a watch over it internally. When I'm saying watch, what I mean is that every time anything changes under the scope object, we have $scope object, right? That is the root of anything that goes around in your Angular to model that we have. So if anything changes, so there is going to be internally a watch created over this variable. So there is something in Angular that will be keeping an eye on the variables, on the methods inside the scope, whatever it is. And whenever there is some change, anything that changes, there is a method inside my scope, and that method is your $watch. This $watch method supports this watching over mechanism, in which we say that every time, no matter how many, so based upon how many variables you are creating, AngularJS has a framework, it has a mechanism which watches over the variables or methods which are being created, so that it can track what is changing inside that variable, and it can immediately reflect that to your view. So whenever there is binding, automatically there is going to be created a watch over the variables which are coming under your $scope variable. Then how exactly this watch is happening, how exactly your data is being reflected over your front end or over your view? For that, another function that is available, that is your digest function. What this function is going to do, this function keeps on iterating over all the watches and checks if the watched variable have changed. So basically, watch is getting created track of all the variables. It will just watch over the variable. Then there is something called $digest. $digest is comes under something called digest cycle. That is a cycle on which your Angular keeps track of every variable which is being watched. So what happens in that digest cycle? Digest cycle invokes a function called $digest. Function is going to do, it will run in a cycle. It will check if any of the watched variables have changed. If a watched variable has changed, there is going to be a listener. Listener in your AngularJS, listener simply means there is a function in listeners are nothing but function in itself. They particularly listen to some sort of events. So internally, Angular offers a listener. Then as soon as a variable is changed, this dollar will invoke that listener, so that the corresponding work or corresponding changes, whatever is there, in order to reflect that new value of the watched variable, can be provided. So uh, digest function basically runs in a cycle which is termed as your digest cycle. What it does, whatever variable is being watched, if there is a change in that variable, it will call a listener, and that listener function will do whatever work needs to be done. For example, let's say if there is an HTML input type, and let's say if there is a box, and if you are changing the value of that variable which is being binded, and you want to reflect it on a paragraph tag or span tag or whatever. So if the change in the variable is happening, a corresponding listener is going to be called, and that listener will be doing all the things in order to reflect that what changes are there, in order to reflect that on, or that on an HTML text document or whatever it is. So the function which is my dollar digest function, this is the function which triggers the data binding to update. We have binded the data, now we need that binding to update the values that we have. Watch will simply say that watch over this variable just in case something changes, but digest will then take control about the variables which are put under this watch. It will run in a loop again and again, make sure that if there is any change which is occurring, it can take care about reflecting it or triggering the bind to trigger the updation of the data onto your front end or onto whatever it is. So that's exactly what your dollar digest function is going to do. Then we have dollar apply. Basically what happens, this apply function is used whenever you want to execute some code. First of all, how this process goes of binding and updation. First of all, Angular will call your dollar apply. Dollar apply function will execute some code, and then it will call your dollar digest. After that, all the watches are going to be checked, and then corresponding watch listener functions are called. So basically dollar apply function is the one which integrates your Angular JS with other code. So first, how the process is going to run. First of all, your dollar apply, it will use to execute any piece of code. We are talking about how Angular works internally. So we have first of all your dollar apply is used to execute whatever code you have, whether you have get whether you are using HTTP, whether you are updating normal content or you are reading data or whatever it is. First of all, your dollar apply will be called. Dollar apply will call your dollar digest to see if the changes are happening or not, and then finally your digest cycle will run to check all the watched variables, and then correspondingly will calling your watch listener so that the binding can be updated and the data can be provided properly, and so on. So this is exactly what these functions are going to do. Right? We will see the implementation now, that how exactly. So if required, by default there is always going to be a watch that is getting created. But let's say how exactly this variable is going to work, or these functions are going to be used in our code, or how exactly you can make use of it. But as far as the processing is concerned, are we clear about it? Are we clear about what watch is, what digest cycle is, and what apply method are going to do? Let's see the implementation. And let's say over here, I will simply print something. Okay, so now this is just a simple HTML that we have created, which will print one variable, which is my welcome message. Now, let's say how exactly this is going to impact our code if we are watching over this variable, if watch is being created, and if we have triggered any event at any given point of time. Let's say if my controller over here, let's write a method message, and we will run it in a timeout kind of manner. Will show the message that we have after few seconds basically. So now let's say I'm implementing set timeout. You all know about set timeout, right? Okay. And let's say I will say dollar scope dot w message is equals to I. And let's try to print it as well. Console.log. Okay, and setting it for about 2000 milliseconds. Be done with it. What we have done, we have just provided one application in which we are implementing some sort of watch over. So whenever we are creating this method, whenever we are calling this function will be invoked, which is setting the value of my message, and we are saying that call this message after 2000 milliseconds. So now let's say if I'm going to load this page, what do you think? What will happen? What should be the output of this program? You can see it right in front of you. What do you think? What should be the output of it? Message as high angular watch. Okay, let's run it. F12 console. Let's see the console. Any message? Do you see any message being printed? Do you see it? I think its getter is not. Change it to get message, and let me just make it message. Now let's see. 2000 milliseconds, which is basically 2 seconds. So ideally, it should take it as getter and work. Alright, so now print here, if you see messages high angular watch is coming in the console, which means timeout is executing, but do you see it on the view? Putting inside timeout, putting it here, which means timeout is executing after 2 seconds. There's nothing coming on the view. Any guesses why? Okay. Uh, Sorry, 1 second. I'm just fumbling up earlier. Let's say I have this function which I have provided into a set timeout. Right now, I've just printed it. I'm saying whatever value I want to set. Now, if I refresh it, see the value of the variable is being set. I can see it at the console. But if you see on my front end, on my view, it is still not coming. Even after the message is being printed, I cannot see it on my view right up front. Right, so why is this happening? Why we are saying that even though we have provided the function, we are saying that after this amount, or let's say after a particular timeout, we should update it. But at this point of time, what is happening that we have not even my digest cycle. What is happening at this point that we cannot see after after 2 seconds, we are not able to see what exactly is the value of the variable which is being set on the view. So the binding between the variable and the view is not happening. How can I do that if I have to provide the binding between these two things, so that after a particular interval of time the scope, or let's say the view, can be updated? We have to call dollar apply manually. Why? Because dollar apply will be something which will automatically trigger your digest, so that the watchers can be fired. So if you are using any timeout services or anything at all, if I want to call this apply method manually, if I want to keep the track of all the variables that are available, I have to call this dollar apply, so that my digest cycle can be started and the watch can be applied on all the variables. Why? Simply because the variables that we have provided, they are inside a function. Even after doing that, we are not able to after about 2000 milliseconds, as the variable is now inside this, the variable is not being watched basically until unless you supply your dollar scope dot apply. So that is why trigger the watch mechanism, we have supplied dollar dot apply, and when we are doing it now, any changes in the variable are being reflected on my view. So this is how the binding is going to happen. Whenever a digest cycle is running, the watchers are executed to see if the models are if running or not. To invoke the listener, first of all we need to execute that code by using dollar apply. So whenever there is a need for you, whenever you have to implement your whenever you have to provide a manual implementation of your apply. So the question here is, When exactly do I have to call this dollar apply? We are saying that Angular by default has the implementation of dollar apply that we have seen till now as well. Then what exactly is the purpose of calling this dollar apply over here? So what happens if I have any variable, if I have any model that I am changing outside the context of Angular, outside the context or outside the range of Angular, if I have something like that, at that point, if I want that variable to be reflected on the front end, to be reflected on the view, I have to call dollar apply. Set timeout does not belong to Angular. This is a JavaScript function. This function is outside the scope of your Angular perspective. So for me to make use of this message function which I'm binding to the view, if I want this to be binded to the view and being reflected as well, I have to manually call dollar uh, apply method so that watch can be initiated, so that the digest cycle can be initiated and it can watch over the variable and so on. So that is the purpose of implementing, or this is the place where you are going to dollar apply. Internally, if you are writing anything, let's say if I don't call this set timeout, I just provide dollar scope over here or any method implementation. If I'm going to do that, by default, my Angular will take care about implementing any type of watch or whatever it is. But if I have to go outside the range of my Angular, if I have to provide something else, I need to make sure that the value is being changed or whatever it is, and that I can do by providing dollar scope variable. And then another thing, let's say if I have to provide, if I have to set actually a variable which is being watched, let's provide the implementation for watch. Now let's say what is the variable where that need to be watched is my message. And in the callback for this for watch function, we have two parameters. One is your new value, value which is being changed, and another is your old value. So console.log. So this is the implementation of your dollar watch. If you're watching over any variable and you want that to be updated, or you want to see what exactly is happening, how Angular is processing all these things, you can see the implementation, and you can even provide a watch over any variable that you have provided, and you just want to see how the values are being changed. Let's say if you have an input type, as soon as you're typing something, you want that to be binded with some other variable. But let's say uh, say input type to text model equals to message. Right, now let's go back and refresh and see what. Let's say if I'm typing A, old value is still undefined, new value is AS. Old value is A, new value is AS. Do you see how it is being watched over every time you type something? The value is being coming into your correspondingly new value is being updated. So this is exactly how watch happens. This is exactly how your dollar digest and dollar apply is being called. So now internally what is happening? Internally Angular is calling dollar apply. Dollar apply is invoking your digest cycle by calling your dollar digest. Dollar digest is then finally calling the list. By default, whenever we have binded something, a watch is getting created. So your dollar digest is going through all the watches which are being created and finally binding the changes to the application that we have. So this is exactly based how your watch can be implied over any variable that you have if you have created it and so on. And if you have to go outside the context of your AngularJS to invoke your watches, you have to call your dollar apply, which invokes your digest cycle and finally provides a watch over the variable. All right, is this clear? Is this clear now? But very all right. Anyways, so why? It is very important from your interview perspective again. Okay, yes, of course. So if I do not apply dollar apply, I'm changing my scope variable within the set timeout method. Set timeout method does not belong to my Angular. It is a JavaScript function. It is out of the context of my Angular perspective right now. We are not calling any inbuilt Angular directives or functions. We are not calling it. We are not setting it as corresponding to scope. It is outside the range of my Angular, and I have created a variable which I want binded with my scope. Then how my view binding happens between your view and model to the scope object. Even though I'm setting it with my scope object, my Angular does not know that it has to invoke. So this what I'm trying to say over here, that this message, even though I have binded it, even though I have attached it with my dollar scope, it is not being watched. Why? Because it does not lie within the range of my Angular JS. It is not a part of anything coming from Angular. It is a part of a function which is my set timeout function, which comes from JavaScript. And when that is happening, my view is not being, even though after this method is invoked, after 2 milliseconds, my view does not know that the existence of this message, simply because it is not being watched. So to make this message, to make this method also know that it has to watch over this message being binded with scope inside this set timeout, we have to manually call dollar apply, so that my view, so that dollar apply can call digest cycle and can call digest method to see, to make sure that this message is being watched, and so that it can provide the binding on the view as well to invoke the changes. So that is why we have to call manually the dollar uh, dollar apply method. So whenever you are writing any piece of code, whenever you are changing the scope object outside the range of your Angular, somewhere outside which is not a part of your Angular, you have to manually call your dollar apply to invoke the digest cycle and to make sure that variable that you are putting over there is being watched now by Angular. So basically what you are trying to do, you are creating a linking between Angular and the things which are outside Angular by calling your dollar apply. All right. Next, we are going to talk about in Angular something called filters. What are filters? Filters are used. to club your expressions, whatever expressions you have, with some other functionalities. Other functionality, as in, let's say, if you are printing some sort of, if you are if you are implementing something related to your pricing mechanism, in which you are showing the price of different items, and you want that to be coming with a dollar sign, or you want some text to be converted into uppercase or lowercase, and if you want to get it sorted, all that can be done by applying your filters. um any directive or any expression that you have, that can have a filter applied to it by using your pipe symbol, which is uh, yes, by using your pipe symbol. So what different filters we have? Typically we have five filters in my Angular. One is your uppercase, then we have lowercase, we have currency, we have filter, then we have order by. These five filters. First of all, uppercase converts any text that we have to uppercases, lowercase to lowercase. Uh, Currency will be converting or formatting any text into a currency format, and then filter is something uh, which will basically provide you in a subset of any given array based upon the criteria that you have provided inside filter. And then order by is used to order the content that you have based upon the condition that you are providing. So now let's see how exactly these things can be implemented, or all these filters can be implemented on your front end. Let's say if I want to show any content, let me comment it first. Filters are very easy to implement. Let's say if I want to show this message into uppercases. So for that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to provide a filter that will be my uppercase filter. So wherever I'm printing it, let's say dollar message, pipe, which is this symbol on your keyboard, and write the filter that you want to provide. So I can say, sorry, my class is up. Let's write the implementation and then I'll run it all together. Say if I want to see, so your currency should be used with anything which is numeric, obviously, because it will have a symbol which is your dollar symbol default. And uh, so ideally, this will not be the right place to provide your currency or anything, but if required, so you should put it with anything which is numerical. Let's say you have price, any type of fees or total that you want to calculate. For that, you can apply currency. And then let's say if you have to, okay, let me first run it, then I'll show you the filter and order by as well. Numeric values. So do you see how uppercase and lowercase are working based upon what we have provided? It is coming into either uppercases and lower cases. So if you see, the currency is now being updated to $0.00. By default, as I'm typing alphabets, it's not. If you see over here, it is giving you dollar and a default value corresponding to it, which is $0.000. Now let's say if I type something into the capital, lowercase will obviously convert into the small letters and so on. So this is exactly what your case, this is exactly what your filters are going to do. They will convert it into, they are just going to filter whatever model you have, whatever data you have, based upon the calculations you are providing. So we have three basic one, which is your uppercase, lowercase, and currency. If you see, if you are providing anything related to currency, this is how your currency is going to come. Now let's see, if I want to provide some sort of filters as well, I want to filter the data based upon a specific condition, I want to order it. Let me provide something into the controller. Let's say in my controller now, we write a very simple implement. Candidate is equals to, let's write our object literal, and let's say first name Sam, comma, last name colon, and let's say is colon 5, comma, course. Let's create an array now. Okay. Let's say marks, it by 400. So we have this candidate. Now let's say, if I, let me just change it, I will say these basic things just to print the currency and all. Now let's say, if you have to provide all the subjects, and you want to provide filter on top of it. So in filters we have a filter, we have a function which is your filter function. How exactly you can apply it? Let's say that's an array. I will provide an ul ling repeat as student. I think I take it as candidate. Let's take it as student only. Then I'll say ng repeat is equals to student dot course. Now on this, I want to apply a filter. Filter will allow us to retrieve our things based upon one particular criteria. So now let's say what type of filter I want to apply. I want to apply the filter on a subject name. I want to retrieve information only based upon what is the name of the subject that I have. So for that, what I'm going to say, I will provide something. Let's say I want to create filtration based upon the name of the subject. So I can say filter colon, and the next. So let's see what happens if I run it now. If you see Sam, uppercase, Peter, and the currency is coming like this, and then okay, let me change the order first. If you see right now we have we are providing order by, and as well as we are filtering the information based upon the name. We are basically filtering it based upon the name of the subject. So what we are trying to do, out of the content that we have provided, we just want to filter out the subject's name at any given point of time, and correspondingly we are putting it over there. So your filter and order by can be used to filter out your content based upon a specific condition, and then we are finally ordering it by the marks that we have provided. So both of these can be used to provide filtering, and as well as what do you call it, the ordering of elements based upon what calculations you have to do. So your currency and your order by is one of the few two of the most used ones in your Angular to provide the filtration of elements alongside your elements. All right, so this is what you can do. So you can apply a filter, you can apply a lowercase, you can apply an uppercase, or whatever you feel like in your code based upon what calculations you are doing. But this will not be an exact implementation of provide you a filtration based. Let me give you another example of filter, how exactly that would be coming. Okay, so now let's say what exactly a filter would be doing. Let's say over here, instead of message, I provide a filter. Now over here, if I see now UI, do you see only UI is being coming? So it's like the what do you call it, like a search mechanism that your filter is going to provide. If you have multiple subjects, you want to show only one content, you will do whatever you are typing, that is being filtered out from for you in the list. By default, I have three subjects which are being ordered based upon their marks. If I want to pick one, if I'm typing, I have blended my course name over here in the filter. So if I want it to be applied, if I'm saying UI, only UI is being shown. If I'm saying let's say .NET marks are being shown, and so on. So your filter, as I told you initially, is used to filter out a content. So just like how you have a search and you have a list, you want to pick few values and then you want to show them. Values can be filtered based upon what you are applying, and that's what your filtration is going to do. And it's simple to implement. So these are the different filters that we have. Clear? I think these are very easy to understand. Or different types of filters. Is this clear? Alright, next very important concept in your Angular, which also is asked in few of the interviews, that is your internalization. By default, how so one of people do ask, what is internalization? Can you tell me what is internalization? When I'm saying this, that. What is this word meant for? Anyone? What is internalization? Heard of this term internalization before? No. Internalization basically means that in any application which is supposed to cater to multiple regions, multiple languages, multiple countries, you provide a localization of it. Localization as in, let's say today we are in States. If I have to open an application, let's say Amazon, if I'm opening Amazon.com, all the prices will be in dollar. So if I'm concatenating something right now, it is coming into it is coming with your currency is coming concatenated with dollar. Let's say I want to open Amazon.in, which is Indian, so at that time currency should come into your rupees. So by default, how exactly, what exactly you can do for these types of things? Generally, these calculations initially were done based from your on your server side. You have your locale, you switch your locale, you write some JavaScript functions to switch the locale at any given point of time. You take what is current currency, you basically provide filters, but you read data from your server and you write your calculations on your server and to switch the currency. But now AngularJS by default provides three types of filter to provide internalization. Those filters are currency, date, and numbers. By default, AngularJS is providing three type of internalization. So now, what happens if the locale of your browser changes? On changing the locale of your browser, the currency, the elements, and all those things needs to be updated and should be shown to you based upon what exactly you are trying to do. So your Angular provides locale support for multiple languages, and that you can use to provide the internalization in your browser. So for example, let's say over here in this code, change something. Dollar student fees is already there. Let's say provide uh, let's say edible colon new date. Sorry, I have provided. Let me take as ID. So I have added this information again. I have added one field which is corresponding to any student that we have. Then I have fees and I have added enroll date to show the currency changes. Now, how exactly you can provide it in your Angular, or what locales your Angular is offering. Okay, so have to include a locale folder, you have to include a JavaScript in order to deal with the locale. So by default, let's say Angular is providing this locale which is corresponding to your Danish locale. So it is D underscore D. So this is the bundle that you have to provide, or that you have to include within your application to take usage of a locale. So this is what you need to do as a first step. Whatever locale your Angular is offering, you will be providing the name of the locale and so on. So by default, the locale that you are going to provide, it is formatted, or it is provided in this manner. First of all, you have your language ID, and then you provide your country ID, and correspondingly, it is going to pick up the changes that you have specified in order to implement in order to provide the local type of currency, local type of date, and whatever it is that can be done by using your locale. So first thing that you need to do if you're implementing internalization is to add on the script which is coming from your Angular's locale. So now let's say what we are going to do. We are going to include this our JavaScript as a JavaScript file. So over here, this is my CDN. Mm, Let me pick up the proper CDN. CDN. So that we can include it. Alright, so if you see, there are so many CDNs that are available. So based upon whatever language you are trying to pick, you can pick any of these ones, put them into your code to your currency. So now let me pick the Danish one, which I know is used. Let's add it in. So we have added this locale onto our page. Now let's see what are the changes which are being reflected. So we have already shown the currency. Let's display the ID and date. We'll say number, which is the date of return, and we'll say date filter. Let's see the changes now. Okay, yes. So currency is also coming from your internalization. Now, do you see how currency is coming? 575 KR. ID is normal and date is coming 31 December 1969. So whatever date you are providing, whatever things are happening, or based upon whatever date you are trying to calculate, the format of the date is also changing. So that's what internalization is. All you have to do is pick up a language. There are by default so many languages provided over here. Pick up that language based upon the currency. You can look for a particular language as well, and that can be reflected on your application. The corresponding changes will be reflected on your date type, on your number type, and on your currency type to provide the local needs as per the currencies that you have available. So all you have to do is pick up a correct locale, a correct locale CTN and then use that to implement the internalization. And this was most recently asked in one of the interviews that how what is internalization and how you can implement that into using your Angular. So for that, by default, Angular provides many locales, all those locales in order to provide a support for a local language. So internalization simply means that we are asking our code to be implemented date. So if you see, if I've changed it to English locale, it's now giving me pound. ID, obviously that's a numeric value, it's not changing, and then date is coming like this. So based upon whatever locale you want to show, you can make use of the CDNs which are being provided by Angular to show a particular locale and which can be implemented. So internalization simply means showing the content of your application based upon a specific region. By default, there are three types of internalization provided by Angular. One is your on numbers, another is on your date, and last one is on your currency, which you can make use of. All right, is this clear? All we did is just provided the locale and then added the filters on top of it. Number filter. All right. Now there is another thing in Angular that's getting very famous nowadays, which is introduced after your Angular, I guess 1.6, and what that thing is, that is called your promises. Actually, are promises. Promises are a way for your Angular to provide asynchronous function calls. What are asynchronous function call? Anybody? What do I mean when I say asynchronous? Yes, asynchronous simply means there is not going to be any wait provided by it. So callbacks, uh, what happens, promises in your Angular are provided by a service. That service is represented by something $q. So there is a service in your Angular that is your $q service. What happens when you are using this service? This is going to provide an execution of asynchronous function which will allow you to call your functions in a manner in which you are not waiting for anything and you're processing your code just like how it is coming. So that's exactly what your asynchronous is going to be is going to be. So when we are saying that what a promises is, we are providing a way to execute an asynchronous function in a series by registering it with a promise object. So promises allows us to create this type of application where things are being executed as per in a normal, in a sequential, in an asynchronous manner. So how exactly, what exactly these promises are offering? By default, the service which we have offers an object which is called your deferred object. What that deferred object means, that object exposes a promises simply saying that, let's say if you are making um, okay, in simpler word, what a promise is, that let's say just like just a normal promise that you have. If I have promised someone to do something, I am going to make sure that it is being delivered. So promise are simply based upon a functionality which says that whatever handshake you have said that you are going to make, you are making sure that you are going to deliver that. So there is a very simple example that floats around in the industry, that is to understand promises. It's simply, let's say if you have promised yourself, let's say if I'm promising that I am going to go out somewhere, at that time I'm going to make sure that that promise is being delivered at any given point of time. We are saying that, let's say simply let's say I'm saying I'm going to go out today. Now there are conditions associated to it. The condition is, let's say if weather is good, we will go out. If weather is not good, we will just do it somewhere else. So for that, that's just a kind of handshake that we are preparing in order to make sure that the promise is being delivered. So now how exactly you can implement this, how exactly you are going to implement the promises in your code. So for example, controller, let's say providing app. Mm, let me do this. A favorite example that you can find as well, promises. Have B, which is weather API, and then dot. Then, if you remember the implementation of get from HTTP, it's the same thing that we have done yesterday, last time. Response. So then, if response is this, return response dot data. Over here, let's say response, and now I will say return to reject response dot data. Let me write it, then I'm gonna explain it to you what exactly we are trying to do over here. So what we have right now, what I have created, I have just created a simple function. So we have created a service which is my get service function. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to create a function in which we are trying to make a promise. Let's say there is a father son. Father has promised the son that I am going to take you out for the fishing, and for that there is a promise uh, created. That promise is being delivered on the basis of how the weather is. So what we are doing, we are creating a certain service in which we are delivering that. We are saying, first of all, in this get weather, first of all, get what type of how the weather is. First of all, there can be any days with, let's say, first of all, based upon if weather is correct, we will return the response, or if weather is not correct, we are calling this method, which is reject method, coming from my promise service, which says that in case something is not right, we will just what do you call it, we are just going to reject the promise that is being provided. So that is simply whatever promise is being made, we are going to reject that. Then apart from that, there are defer variables. So what, sorry, that defer function, what defer function does, defer function is coming from your API itself. What it is going to do, it will take the entire object from your promise. It says that defer is equals to dot defer. Defer function basically contains things. One is that whether the promise is being delivered, another is whether the promise is being rejected. So at that time, what we are trying to do, let's say if I am getting the correct result, if I am getting the correct output, I'm going to provide over here return. Let's say I can simply say return for dot solve, which means that I have received a successful response, and I'm going to say that the data is being received, or whatever is going to have, I'm just going to return that based upon the promise that I have made. So promises are just used to provide this type of implementation. They have three methods basically. One method talks about having a defer object. Then defer object then have three function. One is your resolve, then is there is reject, then there is something called promise property as well. Whenever we are creating a deferred object, we are saying that first of all, you will be returning a promise property. Promise property talks about that now the process is going to go run in a asynchronous manner, and after that asynchronous function is being returned, or when the process is going to be completed, it will resolve the deferred object, and if there is any error, it will execute your rejection on that service that you have just created. So this is exactly for your functions are being created. So based upon these calculations, your am I putting it on a wrong place? So that's exactly what your promises are all about, creating an asynchronous calls using a service provided by your Ajax, which provides you three things. One, first of all, when you are using your promise, first thing you get is a deferred object. Deferred object can be then resolved into three again three subsets or three properties. One is your resolve, which simply says that data is now being resolved. Another part is, one second. Another part is your reject, which simply says that if there is any error, you just have to reject the data. And the last part is a promise property, which says that whether, no matter what you are doing, whether your promise is being achieved or not. And that's exactly what all these functions are going to do. To start off with, we have a service which is your $Q service, using which you can make use of all the functions that you have provided. And this is exactly, you can make use of promises in your Angular JS. Okay, I cannot run it because I do not have any weather API that I can show you, but typically the idea is that you have a service which will be providing you to implement an asynchronous function calls by using $Q, and then making use of a deferred object which comes from a deferred function, and then the deferred object can have three properties. One is your resolve, then you have reject. Over here you should say defer dot reject, and finally there is something called defer dot promise. So reject and resolve are functions, whereas there is a property which is your promise property, which simply says that whether promise is delivered or not. So it's just like an handshake which happens between two parties to make sure that they are calling, that this is happening in an asynchronous manner, and as soon as whatever is being and whatever is being promised, that is being delivered or not, just like what we have in event handling, something similar to event handling. All right, clear? Okay, so I think, yeah, so that's it what we have for Angular. We have covered most of the important ones thing. Yeah, so that's it. So any doubts about Angular, whatever we have discussed till now? Okay, yes, Shobha. Pooja, please put your doubt, whatever you have, on the chat window. All right. So, what are providers? First of all, providers are the services that are are a way of implementing services into your Angular JS. What exactly a provider is going to do? Provider allows you to have an implementation related to uh, what do you call it, related to any of the service that you have. When you are implementing a provider, you have to do few things. First of all, you are going to make use of the provide function in your Angular JS, and how exactly you are going to, yeah, yes, Shobha. So how exactly you are going to do provide that implementation? You will call app.provide method or app.provider method. Inside that app.provider, you will provide a $.get function implementation, which will provide any value or which will return any calculation that you are going to do. So for example, let's say, let me implement it. How exactly we are going to provide or implement our own provider? For whatever application I have, I will say app.provider. Let's say I will say my provider, comma, function, and then to implement it, I will provide. So you can obviously add anything, but to return something out of this provider, you have to provide an implementation for $.get, which will make sure that you can embed it inside your configuration. So let's say function, and over here I will let just return my provider, just a string I'm returning. Okay, so this is as simple as that. I have provided an implementation for a provider which I'm writing over here. Now, you have to make use of this provider, what exactly you are going to do, whatever controller you have specified now, or you can put it inside your app.config as well to do any type of calculation. So now again, just like service or just like anything, whenever you are writing it, you will simply say app.controller. It's just like creating your service or whatever, or factory or whatever you want to create. And let's say my controller is ctrl, comma, I will say function, dollar scope. If I'm dealing with scope, if I want to set something, and then I will provide my provider. My provider. Control V over here, and yeah, let's just print it. Console dot log my provider. That's it, done. So this is exactly how you can create a provider. If you want to embed it inside your uh, configurations, you can call that inside your configuration as well. So what happens, dollar dot get dot dollar get function is called only once to set the properties of using all of your providers. So then important thing is that why should not, where we should use our provider or any factory or anything at all. So at that time, whenever we are using provider or whenever we are using anything else, the only feature that your provider supports is that provider allows you to have its configuration, or it allows you an option to for it to be invoked inside your configuration, so that you can set your system level configurations at one point. If you are using anything else, you will not be implementing your dollar get function, and rest of the things are going to be done by your factory or service or whatever you provide. But with your provider, you are you must have to provide your dollar get function in order to return something or in order to provide anything. So just like creating your getter and setter, your provider by default provides an implementation which is your dollar get, which you can use to have your implementation over here. All right. The important thing for providers as well is the difference between your service, factory, and provider. Alright, Pooja has a question. In the assignment question, how will you be able to change color on selection? That's a code that you need to provide, Pooja. You need to have an event to be triggered, so you can create a toggle between the elements. So think about it. I can just give you an hint that create a toggling event and handle that toggling event on the scope. We have toggling, right? You can have fire a toggle event to change the color. At that time, change the CSS of the element. Okay, so what you should implement something similar to having a toggling event in which you are changing the CSS of the element. First of all, let's see what is Node.js. Node.js is nowadays one of the most powerful or one of the most used JavaScript framework. Node.js is built on your Google Chrome, and it uses C++ as well. So your node was developed by around, I guess, 2009 by by a very young developer who was in his, I think, in his 20s only, or in late early 20s only, named Ryan Dahl. So what exactly is Node.js? Before then working of your Node.js, every time you have a script or so basically, as you all know, JavaScript is used till uh, before your Node.js was started or was came into picture. Your script was typically used for doing your client's calculations, whether you have to provide some sort of validations on your front end or whatever it is, but typically on your client side. But Node.js allowed you to do your server side calculations or all the things that you can do on a server side by using JavaScript as the primal language. Why? Because JavaScript does not have any mechanism of your threads or synchronous calls or whatever it is. It provides callbacks, right, in which you can call something again and again. So which makes JavaScript very popular among different languages when it comes to performance and all these things. So when Node.js was introduced, it allowed us to make use of JavaScript. JavaScript has a characteristic, some certain characteristic which makes it very different from any other dynamic language. For example, there is no concept of threads. Is based upon a model of concurrency where you are going to work around events and all that kind of stuff. So due to these factors, your JavaScript is nowadays have had was gaining its popularity. It was coming into picture that JavaScript can do a variety of things. It is so vast that you can use it for any type of things on your client side. So that made or that invented your Node.js, which said that using JavaScript, which primarily was used only for client end application, you can build your frameworks, you can create your application, then you can do your server side scripting JavaScript only. So your Node.js is an open source uh, application which is being used across the industry nowadays by thousands and thousands of developers. There are so many frameworks that have been evolved after the usage of Node.js to allow people to use JavaScript and as well as C++ to introduce your to work with your application. So your Node.js allows you to do server side and to work on networking applications very easily. It is written in your JavaScript and can be run with your on any of the operating system that you have available. Node.js can be used mostly it can be used for applications which are event driven, which in which you are doing a lot of input output, so that you can create applications very easily. Applications using Node.js are very lightweight and efficient in terms of anything else, as compared to anything else that we have seen till now. So what exactly Node.js offers? So your Node.js is typically contains three things. First of all is your libuv, which is a library provided by your Node.js, which allow you to have a very high performing input output. Then it has V8, which is your Google Chrome's JavaScript native engine, and then finally JavaScript gets converted into native support of C++, which allows you to do any asynchronous or any type of events or input output operations very easily. So these are the three core components or building blocks of your Node.js if you have to work on. Then what are the various features that you have in your Node.js that makes it so popular? One of the feature that is obviously most talked about, so that is your async. Every API that we have in Node.js library, they are asynchronous, which means they are non-blocking. Every time there is a server, or every time you create a server, which is a normal server, every time you make a call to it, it waits for a certain amount of time till that call is completed. But when we are talking about asynchronous mechanism, there is not going to be any wait, or there is not going to be any type of blockage in terms of returning the call from there. The server in your Node.js will keep on processing the request next without waiting for one type of code to be completed. So for example, let's say if I'm working in any other language, if I'm writing my server on a Java end, or I'm using any other servers that are available in the previous time, let's say I have a simple thing, I am going to read from a file. Let's say if I have an input.txt, I need to read it from a file, and then I'm implementing it not in Node.js, I'm implementing it in some other language, let's say Java. So for example, how exactly that algorithm is going to work? First of all, let's say it is going to read file from the file system. First of all, for any other language, it will complete the reading of file as the first step, and then let's say it will assign the contents to some variable. Once that is done, then as a second step, it will print the contents, and then it will move to doing something else. This is how typically any other environment will process the file reading from a file. Then how exactly this happens in your Node.js? First thing, read the file. In your Node.js, it will not wait to read the entire file and then do the assignment to something and then print the content. Meanwhile, let's say if you have a very big file or a normal file as well, first of all, it will start reading the file. If the file is huge and it is taking time, then what is the second thing that happens in your node? It says that whenever you are complete, print the content. Do something else. So Node.js says that, let's say, start reading from a file. If you cannot do it immediately, move over. As soon as you're complete, as soon as you have read the entire file, then print your content. So you do not have to hold on the step where you are first going to read the entire file. Just start reading the file, do something else. Whenever you are complete, print the content. So this is the point where your callback mechanism in your Node.js comes into picture. First of all, reading the file. Second step will always be printing the content. But Node says you do not have to execute the second step right at that front. You do something else, and as soon as this is completed, as soon as there is an event which will be getting fired to indicate that the reading of a file is complete, call back this second step so that you can complete. And this makes your Node.js asynchronous, and to make use of the things which make use of event handling and all those usage of your callback, which simply says that you do not have to wait for anything in your processing. You can keep on doing your normal processing without the usage of your without halting the processing. So it is more of your input output driven. You have an input, you show the output. You have input, as soon as that input is being processed and being calculated, you show the output. You do not wait for anything else. You just keep on executing whatever is in the queue, whatever is coming to you in a sequence, in a normal manner, without waiting for anything else to get completed. So you keep on doing your work without any halt. So this is what your Node.js asynchronous mechanism is. Then second, that it is very fast. First of all, it is being built on your JavaScript. JavaScript is very faster as compared to any other language. It is built on your Google Chrome's native engine, which runs on your JavaScript and which makes it very fast in terms of your code execution. Then it is a single threaded Node.js is single-threaded as it is built on JavaScript, which says that there are not going to be multi-thread. Everything runs in a single thread. So your Node.js uses a single-threaded model with the concept of event looping, which we will see as we move forward, which talks about that every process which is coming is going to be a part of a loop mechanism. Only one single thread will be running in a loop, in a kind of a looping situation where every process will keep on rotating itself till it is being satisfied, till it is being completed in a circular manner. So that is what your Node.js says, that we will, for any request, let's say first of all you are reading from a file, you are reading multiple file, reading file 1, reading file 2, or whatever it is. All these read operations, if you talk about any other languages, they are going to be multiple threads being created. But what Node says that instead of creating multiple threads, everything is going to be a part of one thread, which can be managed by something called your event looping. All these threads will execute sequentially one after the other without waiting for anything else to complete in a circular motion, in which we are saying that as soon as an event is being fired, you can handle it, you can complete the reading of file 1 or file 2 or whatever it is. and that's what a single threaded application is all about. It allows you to handle a way more number of requests as compared to any other servers that you used to have, whether that's your Apache server, WebLogic, whatever server we talk about. The Node.js server runs on a concept of called your event looping, where every thread that you have, or basically there is only one thread, every execution that you have, every processing that you have, that runs in a loop, which that loop is called your event loop. And then Node.js takes care of execution of all the events that are being allocated. Then it allow it the last feature that your Node.js supports, that is the concept of no buffering. There is no mechanism of having any type of being cached and then showing it. It simply says that whatever is coming, just show the output as soon as it is completed, else keep on looping it through till you complete your process. So it does not going to cache any data, it will just show you the output in chunks. If there are if there are multiple things being done or multiple events being completed at one point, it will just show them into one chunk rather than caching them. So there is no buffering mechanism in your Node.js. Then where to use your Node.js? For applications which requires a lot of input output, for single page applications, for API based application in which you are reading from JSON, for any type of data streaming applications, let's say Netflix kind of application, for those types of application you should Node.js. And then for application which requires you to lot to which requires usage of a lot of CPU, those types of application, Node.js should not be used. So these are the few features that we will see in detail as well. Apart from any other thing, the features like it is asynchronous, it runs on a single threaded way, and then it keeps an environment which is basically your event looping, which allows you to run in a circular motion, or to generate events in any given scenario. And it allows you to have a very as because it is object oriented as compared to any other language. And right now we are doing our server side JavaScript, by which was typically used client side script. All right. So these are the basic things about your. Yes, we'll start in detail from tomorrow to see what other